Hey there. Tonight, as you settle into your warm bed, let me transport you back 700 years to a time when the desert winds whispered secrets of unimaginable wealth across the Saharan sands. You're about to drift into the extraordinary world of a man whose gold could buy entire kingdoms, whose generosity crashed economies, and whose pilgrimage changed the course of history. This is the story of Mansa Musa, and by the time you wake tomorrow, you'll know secrets about the richest human who ever lived that your history teachers never mentioned. Did you know that when Mansa Musa traveled through Cairo, he gave away so much gold that it caused inflation for 12 years? Or that his caravan included 60,000 people and 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold dust? So dim the lights, adjust your pillow just right, and let your breathing slow as we journey together through the dusty trade routes of medieval Africa. Close your eyes and imagine the scorching sun of Mali, the weight of gold in your hands, and the call to prayer echoing across ancient Timbuktu. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is as you begin this journey into the past. You find yourself in the year 1280, in the mighty Mali Empire, where the Niger River bends like a golden serpent through the landscape. The air tastes of dust and possibility as young Musa takes his first breath in a mud brick palace adorned with geometric patterns. His mother, a woman whose name history forgot to whisper to us, cradles him while attendants fan away the relentless heat with ostrich feathers. The palace walls echo with the distant sound of griots singing genealogies, their voices carrying the weight of centuries. Outside, the great city of Niani bustles with merchants from distant lands, their camels groaning under loads of salt, ivory, and copper. You watch as his father, Abu Bakr, a brother to the great Mansa who rules this empire, peers at his newborn son with eyes that cannot foresee the destiny written in the stars above. The baby's tiny fingers grasp at air that shimmers with heat, unknowing that these same hands will one day hold more wealth than any human before or after. In the courtyard, sacred crocodiles sun themselves by pools, while marabous cast cowrie shells, reading omens that speak of greatness and journeys beyond imagination. The evening call to prayer drifts across the compound as the sun bleeds orange across the savannah. And somewhere in the distance, a lion roars, marking territory in a world where this infant will one day rule over 200,000 square miles of Africa. 7 years have passed like grains of sand through an hourglass, and you observe young Musa racing barefoot through the palace corridors, his laughter echoing off walls decorated with verses from the Quran written in gold ink. The morning air carries the scent of frankincense and cooking fires as he dodges between servants carrying calabashes of fresh milk and platters of millet porridge sweetened with honey. His teacher, an elderly marabout with a beard white as Saharan salt, waits in the courtyard with a wooden tablet covered in Arabic script. You see how Musa's fingers trace the sacred letters, memorizing verses that will guide his future reign, though his eyes often wander to watch hawks circling in the endless blue sky above. Other noble children arrive for lessons, their father's wealth displayed in amber beads and silver anklets that jingle as they walk. The teacher speaks of mathematics using cowrie shells, teaching the boys to count the vast herds of cattle that represent wealth in this land where gold flows like water. During rest, they play mancala in the shade of baobab trees, moving seeds across carved boards while learning strategy that will serve them in courts and battlefields. As evening approaches, you notice how Musa listens intently to traveling merchants who speak of lands beyond the desert where snow falls from the sky and water turns solid. Tales that seem impossible under this relentless sun. You witness the scorching afternoon when 12-year-old Musa first ventures beyond palace walls into the grand market of Niani, where the air vibrates with haggling voices speaking Mandinka, Arabic, and Fulani. The smell of leather, spices, and sweat mingles as thousands of traders display their wares on woven mats spread across the red earth. His uncle, the great Mansa Abu Bakr II, walks beside him, pointing out gold weights shaped like tiny crocodiles and geometric patterns, explaining how each design tells stories of trade agreements sealed generations ago. You observe Musa's eyes widening as Berber merchants unload blocks of salt worth their weight in gold, while Wangara goldsmiths work their mysterious craft in shadowed stalls, their secrets guarded more carefully than royal treasures. Storytellers gather crowds with tales of Sundiata, the Lion King who founded their empire, their voices rising and falling like ocean waves. Musa has never seen. A procession of slaves carries ivory tusks longer than grown men, destined for ports where ships sail to lands beyond imagination. The boy watches his uncle distribute gold dust to the poor, learning that true wealth means nothing without generosity, a lesson that will echo through centuries. As the sun sets, painting the market in shades of amber and rust, young Musa helps an elderly woman gather her scattered millet when a sudden wind overturns her basket. His first recorded act of kindness that the griots will sing about for generations. The year turns to 1297, and you find yourself in the great mosque of Niani as 17-year-old Musa prostrates himself in prayer, his forehead touching cool stones that have known the devotion of kings. The morning light filters through wooden lattice windows, creating patterns that dance across rows of faithful Muslims, whose synchronized movements resemble waves on an unseen ocean. Between prayers, the Imam speaks of distant Mecca, the holy city that calls to every believer's heart, describing the Kaaba, covered in black silk, and the well of Zamzam, whose water heals both body and soul. You notice how Musa's eyes glisten with longing, as these words paint pictures in his mind of a pilgrimage he dreams of making, though he cannot know that his future journey will be remembered until the end of time. After prayers, he studies with Islamic scholars who've traveled from Cairo and Damascus, learning the hadiths and the complex laws that govern both earthly kingdoms and the path to paradise. In the afternoon heat, he practices calligraphy, his hands steady as he copies verses about justice and mercy, concepts that will define his reign. The muezzin's call echoes across the city 5 times each day, structuring life in rhythms that connect this African kingdom to believers from Andalusia to India. As night falls, you observe him reading by oil lamp light, studying maps of trade routes that cross the Sahara like veins carrying the lifeblood of commerce. You stand witness to Musa's first military campaign at age 20, riding alongside his uncle's army through acacia forests where leopards watch from shadowed branches. The morning mist clings to elephant grass as 10,000 warriors march toward a rebellious province, their spears catching first light like a forest of metal trees. His armor, made from quilted cotton reinforced with strips of leather, weighs heavy on shoulders, still learning to bear responsibility for other men's lives. The army's griots sing war songs that have stirred courage in Mandinka hearts since time immemorial, their voices carrying across valleys where ancestors' spirits are said to dwell. You observe Musa commanding a unit of cavalry, learning to read the battlefield like the scholars taught him to read Arabic texts, understanding that strategy matters more than strength. When they encounter the rebel forces near a river crossing, he watches his uncle negotiate first, offering terms of peace that include fair taxation and representation in the royal court. The battle, when it comes, lasts only hours, but you see how Musa tends to wounded enemies with the same care as his own men, earning respect that gold cannot buy. That night, around campfires where soldiers share dried meat and fermented millet beer, he listens to veterans tell stories of campaigns fought before he was born, absorbing lessons written in scars and memories. The seasonal rains have come and gone 3 times, and you find yourself in the royal court, where 23-year-old Musa serves as deputy to his uncle, learning the delicate art of governance. The throne room fills with petitioners each morning, their grievances ranging from stolen cattle to disputed well rights, each case requiring Solomon's wisdom to resolve. You watch him mediate between two villages, fighting over a gold mine discovered on their border, proposing they share profits, while the crown takes a smaller portion to ensure peace. His uncle nods approval, as Musa suggests establishing schools in remote provinces, understanding that knowledge spreads loyalty faster than armies. Foreign ambassadors arrive from Morocco, bearing gifts of fine horses and Damascus steel, seeking favorable terms for trans-Saharan trade that enriches all parties. During council meetings, elderly advisors debate tax policies using an abacus with gold beads, calculating how many pounds of gold dust flow through the empire each moon. You notice how Musa pays special attention to reports from Timbuktu, the city of scholars where thousands of manuscripts preserve wisdom from across the Islamic world. In quiet moments between duties, he stands on palace balconies, watching the Niger River carry trading vessels toward the sea, dreaming of waters he's only known through travelers' tales. The court musicians play kora harps in the evening, their melodies weaving through conversations about justice, prosperity, and the divine right of kings. You observe the dusty afternoon in 1307, when riders arrive with news that will change everything. Their horses frothing from a journey across hundreds of miles of savannah. Prince Musa stands in the courtyard, as messengers deliver word that his uncle, Mansa Abu Bakr II, has vanished with 200 ships into the Western Ocean, seeking lands beyond the horizon, where the sun drowns each night. The court erupts in confusion as nobles debate whether the Mansa lives or has joined his ancestors, while you watch Musa's face transform from shock to the grave understanding of destiny calling. According to ancient law, the throne cannot remain empty longer than one moon cycle, and as the previous ruler's deputy and closest male relative, Musa stands next in succession. The royal council convenes through the night, oil lamps burning as they discuss precedents and prophecies, while griots recite the lineage of kings, stretching back to Sundiata himself. You witness Musa in the mosque before dawn, praying for wisdom he fears he doesn't possess, his forehead pressed to stones still cool from the night. The morning brings crowds gathering outside the palace, common people and nobles alike, waiting to learn who will hold their fate in his hands. As the sun reaches its zenith, the eldest council member emerges to announce what everyone already knows must be: that Musa will ascend to the throne of Mali, becoming the 10th Mansa of an empire that stretches from the Atlantic to the great bend of the Niger. The coronation day arrives with the dry season's heat, and you stand among thousands gathered in Niani's great square as Musa undergoes the ancient rituals that transform a man into a Mansa. Dawn begins with purification, his body washed in water from 7 sacred wells, while marabouts recite prayers that have blessed rulers since the empire's founding. The royal regalia, hidden in secret chambers since his uncle's departure, emerges piece by piece as the sun climbs higher into the cloudless sky. You watch as they dress him in robes woven from the finest cotton and silk, dyed with indigo so deep it appears almost black, embroidered with golden thread depicting lions, crocodiles, and the sacred symbols of kingship. The great crown, fashioned from a fortune in gold and precious stones, weighs heavy on his head as he takes his place on the sandalwood throne carved with the epic of Sundiata. Chiefs from every province arrive bearing tribute of gold dust, ivory, and rare woods, each swearing loyalty in their ancestral languages while griots sing their lineages. The ceremony continues through the blazing afternoon as Islamic judges administer oaths and traditional priests perform rituals that predate the coming of Islam to these lands. As twilight approaches, you observe the moment when Musa rises as Mansa, His first act to distribute gold to the poor gathered outside the palace, a gesture that will define his reign's character. The celebration continues through the night with drums that can be heard from miles, announcing to the world that Mali has a new king. 6 moons into his reign, you accompany Mansa Musa on his first royal progress through the empire. A journey that reveals both the vastness of his domain and the weight of its challenges. The caravan stretches for miles, including scribes, soldiers, musicians, and mobile courts to dispense justice in remote provinces, where royal authority exists more in theory than practice. Each village greets the procession with celebrations and complaints in equal measure, presenting disputes over water rights that have festered for generations. You observe how Musa dismounts from his horse to sit with village elders under baobab trees, sharing kola nuts while listening to grievances, spoken in dialects his translators struggle to convey precisely. In one drought-stricken region, he orders royal granaries opened and wells dug deeper, understanding that loyalty grows from full stomachs more than fear. The journey takes him to gold mines, where men disappear into the earth, seeking fortunes that will fill his treasury, though he insists on improving safety measures after witnessing a cave-in's aftermath. At Timbuktu, scholars show him manuscripts from Baghdad and Cordoba, speaking of knowledge as the true gold that never loses its luster. You notice how he mentally catalogues each region's needs, planning future projects like bridges over seasonal rivers and caravanserais to shelter traders. The progress lasts 3 full moons, and by its end, Musa has transformed from an untested heir into a ruler who knows his land's every heartbeat.
The year 1312 finds you in Mansa Musa's private chambers as he plans something unprecedented in African history. A pilgrimage to Mecca that will showcase Mali's wealth to the entire Islamic world. Maps cover every surface, showing routes across the Sahara marked with water sources, each oasis a lifeline in an ocean of sand that swallows caravans whole. His advisors argue through the night about logistics, calculating how many camels can carry enough food and water for 60,000 people to survive the crossing. You watch Musa personally select scholars and architects to accompany him, intending not just to pray, but to bring back knowledge that will transform his kingdom. The treasury ministers present figures that would stagger imagination, estimating the journey will cost more gold than most kingdoms see in a century. Letters arrive from Cairo's sultan, offering safe passage, but warning of bandits who prey on wealthy pilgrims despite Islamic law forbidding such crimes. You observe him studying Arabic with renewed intensity, practicing the formal greetings he'll need in courts from Cairo to Mecca, determined to represent Africa with dignity. In quiet moments, he speaks of dreams where he stands before the Kaaba, fulfilling the 5th pillar of Islam that calls every able Muslim to make this journey once in life. The planning continues for 2 full years, each detail scrutinized like battle plans, because Musa understands this pilgrimage will echo through history longer than any military campaign.
You stand at the gates of Niani as dawn breaks over the grandest caravan ever assembled, watching Mansa Musa's pilgrimage begin its legendary journey in the year 1324. 60,000 souls move like a golden river flowing northward, including princes, scholars, merchants, and 12,000 personal slaves dressed in Persian silk and carrying golden staffs. The sight defies comprehension as 80 camels pass, each bearing 300 pounds of gold dust in leather pouches, sealed with the royal mark. You observe Musa's senior wife, Inari Kunate, managing 500 women who accompany the pilgrimage, their palanquins decorated with precious stones that catch morning light like captured stars. The caravan includes portable mosques that will be assembled for prayers 5 times daily, libraries of precious manuscripts protected from sand, and physicians carrying medicines derived from plants that grow only in Mali's forests. Musicians play continuously, their rhythms helping maintain the pace across distances that would break spirits without such encouragement. You notice how Musa rides, sometimes at the front, sometimes at the rear, checking on every section of this moving city that stretches beyond the horizon. Children who've never left their villages run alongside, throwing flowers and prayers at the legendary procession that their grandchildren's grandchildren will still speak about. The dust cloud raised by this mass migration can be seen for miles. A golden haze that announces to the world that Africa's greatest king has begun his journey to God's house. 2 weeks into the Sahara crossing, you experience the desert's brutal reality as the caravan struggles through sand dunes that shift like living mountains. The sun burns so fierce that metal becomes untouchable by noon, and men wrap their faces, leaving only eyes visible against the sand that infiltrates everything. You watch Mansa Musa order the royal water reserves distributed among common pilgrims, when several wells marked on maps prove dry, their locations swallowed by shifting sands. At night, temperatures plummet so drastically that water skins freeze, and the 60,000 huddle together for warmth, while guards patrol against desert raiders who shadow the caravan like patient vultures. The astronomers navigate by stars, their instruments more precious than gold in this featureless expanse, where one wrong turn means death for thousands. You observe how Musa maintains morale by personally visiting different sections each evening, sharing dates and stories, while the griots sing of heroes who conquered impossible odds. 3 camels collapse daily despite careful management, their loads redistributed among animals already struggling. Yet, the gold must reach Mecca to fulfill promises made to God. Sandstorms arise without warning, forcing everyone to lie flat while winds that could strip flesh from bone howl overhead for hours. During brief respites, you notice Musa writing in his journal, documenting this journey that tests faith more than any earthly trial. His words meant for future generations, who might doubt such a crossing was possible. After 40 days in the desert, you witness the caravan's joy as the oasis city of Walata appears like a miracle of mud brick architecture and palm trees rising from endless sand. The inhabitants, accustomed to trade caravans, stand speechless at the sight of Mansa Musa's procession that takes 3 full days to complete its arrival. You observe him ordering immediate payment in gold for every drop of water, every date, every grain of millet. Prices that transform the modest oasis into a wealthy city overnight. The local mosque overflows as thousands join Friday prayers, their voices of gratitude echoing across adobe buildings, while merchants scramble to supply such unprecedented numbers. In the markets, Mali's gold flows like water as pilgrims purchase supplies and souvenirs. Inflation beginning its insidious creep that will affect trade routes for years. You watch Musa receive the city's scholars, who present manuscripts they've preserved from Andalusia's fallen libraries, knowledge rescued from Christian reconquest and offered to Africa's greatest patron. The caravan rests for 2 weeks, while repairs are made to wagons. Camels are treated for sand-worn hooves, and several hundred pilgrims who cannot continue are left with gold enough to live comfortably forever. Children born during the desert crossing are blessed in Walata's ancient mosque, their names recorded in chronicles that will survive centuries. As departure approaches, you notice Musa studying maps of the next stage, the journey to the great city of Cairo, where his generosity will become legend.
The approach to Cairo fills your vision with the greatest city in the Islamic world, its minarets and domes creating a skyline that makes even well-traveled merchants gasp in wonder. You watch as Egyptian officials ride out to meet Mansa Musa's caravan, their formal dignity crumbling into astonishment at the display of wealth that surpasses even the wildest rumors that preceded it. The Sultan of Egypt, An-Nazir Muhammad, sends a regiment of Mamluks in ceremonial armor to escort the Malian king through gates that have welcomed conquerors and scholars for centuries. The streets fill with Cairo's 1 million inhabitants, climbing walls and rooftops to witness this African Mansa, whose gold has been the subject of marketplace gossip for weeks.
You observe Musa's careful diplomacy as he distributes gold to every mosque, every school, every poor quarter they pass. Each handful worth more than most Cairenes see in a lifetime. The procession takes an entire day to wind through the city to reach the palace quarter, where an entire district has been cleared to accommodate the 60,000 pilgrims. In the evening, you attend the formal reception, where Musa presents the Sultan with gifts that include 100 camels loaded with gold and exotic woods from Mali's forests. The court poets immediately begin composing verses about this meeting of two great Islamic rulers, their words to be recited in coffee houses, from Damascus to Fez. That night, the call to prayer from 1,000 minarets reminds everyone that despite earthly splendor, all are equal before Allah.
You spend 3 months in Cairo, witnessing Mansa Musa's transformative effect on the ancient city. Is gold flowing through markets like the Nile floods that bring life to Egypt? Every Friday, he attends the Sultan's mosque wearing different ceremonial robes, each worth enough to build entire villages. Yet his devotion during prayers shows genuine humility before God. The city's scholars flock to his temporary court, discussing everything from Aristotle's works translated into Arabic to new mathematical proofs developed in Timbuktu's libraries. You observe him commissioning Egyptian architects to return with him to Mali, offering salaries that drain Cairo's construction sites of their best minds. In the poorest quarters, his charity creates scenes of jubilation as families pay debts that have enslaved them for generations, though merchants begin complaining that so much gold has made their silver worthless. The Sultan holds nightly feasts, where Musa tells stories of Mali's founding, of gold mines that stretch for miles, of libraries where every book is copied by hand, with ink made from precious stones. You notice Egyptian nobles whispering about this African king, who makes their wealth seem modest, some suggesting his kingdom might be worth conquering, though others warn of armies that number in the hundreds of thousands. As Ramadan approaches, Musa announces his final gift to Cairo, funding the construction of a mosque and school that will bear his name for centuries, ensuring Africa's presence in the heart of the Islamic world remains permanent. The caravan departs Cairo as autumn winds begin to cool the desert, but you notice the city they leave behind has been forever changed by Mansa Musa's 3-month presence. The gold markets have crashed so thoroughly that merchants weep openly, knowing it will take years for prices to stabilize after such an injection of wealth. You observe Musa's expanded caravan, now including Egyptian scholars, architects, and poets who've abandoned comfortable lives for the adventure of building an African renaissance. The journey toward Mecca follows ancient pilgrimage routes marked by the bones of those who failed this test of faith, each white marker a reminder of the desert's merciless nature. At the Red Sea port of Suakin, you witness his fleet of chartered ships, their captains made wealthy beyond dreams for agreeing to transport thousands across waters where pirates usually prey on pilgrims. The crossing takes 2 weeks of seasickness and prayers, the African interior dwellers experiencing the ocean's vastness for the first time, some refusing to believe water can stretch beyond the horizon. You watch Musa tend personally to those suffering from the voyage, his own royal constitution tested by waves that care nothing for earthly titles. When the Arabian coast finally appears, the caravan's joy erupts in songs that blend Mandinka rhythms with Arabic prayers, a sound never heard before in these ancient lands. The final approach to Mecca begins with ritual purification, every pilgrim donning simple white cloth that makes king and slave indistinguishable before God's house. You stand with Mansa Musa as he first glimpses the Kaaba, the black-draped cube that represents the center of the Islamic world, and watch tears stream down his face unchecked. The Grand Mosque of Mecca throngs with pilgrims from every corner of the earth, yet the arrival of 60,000 Malians creates unprecedented congestion in the sacred city. You observe him performing the tawaf, circling the Kaaba 7 times counterclockwise among masses of believers,
his lips moving in constant prayer while his feet bleed from the hot stones. The rituals continue for days as he drinks from the Zamzam well, runs between the hills of Safa and Marwa 7 times, and stones the pillars representing Satan at Mina. Despite exhaustion, Musa ensures every member of his caravan completes their religious obligations, personally carrying those too weak to walk the required distances. You witness him distributing gold to Mecca's poor with such enthusiasm that local authorities beg him to stop, fearing economic collapse like Cairo experienced. At Mount Arafat, where Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon, Musa stands from noon until sunset in contemplation, his prayers for Mali's prosperity and his people's well-being carried on desert winds. The sacrifice of thousands of animals to feed the poor creates a feast that old Meccans will describe to their great-grandchildren, claiming no Hajj before or since matched its magnificence. As the pilgrimage concludes, you notice Musa purchasing property near the Grand Mosque to establish a permanent hostel for African pilgrims, ensuring his continent's connection to Islam's heart endures forever.
Following the Hajj's completion, you accompany Mansa Musa to Medina, where the Prophet Muhammad lies buried in the city that first embraced Islam. The journey between the two holy cities takes 10 days through valleys where Bedouins water their camels at wells blessed by prophetic presence centuries ago. You observe Musa at the Prophet's mosque, praying at the Rauda, the garden between Muhammad's tomb and his pulpit, a space believed to be part of paradise itself. Here he meets Islamic scholars from Persia, India, and Andalusia, engaging in theological discussions that last through cool desert nights, while scribes record their wisdom. The Medinan merchants, warned by letters from Cairo, initially refuse his gold, but Musa insists on paying triple value for everything, arguing that honoring the Prophet's city transcends economic concerns. You watch him commission a library adjacent to the Prophet's mosque, endowing it with funds to copy and preserve manuscripts for centuries, ensuring African Muslims will always find knowledge here. In private moments, he walks the date palm groves where early Muslims sought shade, contemplating how to bring this spiritual awakening back to Mali's distant lands. The local tribes perform sword dances in his honor, their ancient traditions predating Islam, but now woven into the faith's cultural tapestry. As departure approaches, you notice Musa collecting date palm seedlings and architectural plans, intending to recreate pieces of these holy cities in African soil. The return journey begins as summer heat makes the Arabian desert shimmer like water that exists only in desperate imagination. Yet you sense Mansa Musa's spiritual transformation makes physical hardship irrelevant. The caravan, now swelled with Arab and Persian scholars who've joined the African king's vision, moves slowly through territories where Bedouin tribes emerge from nowhere to witness this legendary procession. You observe Musa stopping at every oasis to establish way stations for future pilgrims, leaving gold and instructions for wells to be dug deeper and shelters maintained perpetually. In Damascus, the oldest continuously inhabited city, he spends weeks in the Umayyad Mosque, studying architectural techniques that blend Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic traditions into harmonious beauty. The Syrian merchants present textiles that shimmer like liquid gems, techniques of silk weaving that Mali's craftsmen will spend generations trying to replicate. You watch him purchase entire libraries from scholars fallen on hard times, promising their knowledge will find new life in Timbuktu's growing universities. The journey through Sinai's wilderness recalls Moses' wanderings, and Musa insists on visiting St. Catherine's monastery, showing respect for Christianity's desert fathers despite theological differences. At each stop, more intellectuals join the caravan, drawn by promises of patronage and the chance to shape an African renaissance. By the time they reach Cairo again, you count over 100 scholars who've abandoned everything to follow this king, who values knowledge above gold. Cairo receives Mansa Musa's return with mixed emotions. Merchants still recovering from his previous generosity, while scholars celebrate the knowledge he brings back like conquered treasure. You observe him meeting with the Sultan to discuss establishing permanent trade agreements that will link Mali to the Mediterranean through Egyptian ports. The negotiations last weeks, with scribes drafting documents in Arabic and Mandinka that will govern commerce for centuries, each clause sealed with gold and witnessed by religious authorities. You watch Musa purchasing strange items in Cairo's markets, including astronomical instruments, medical texts describing surgical procedures unknown in Africa, and something called a compass that points always north. The Egyptian architects who agreed to accompany him supervised the loading of building materials onto specially reinforced camels. Their dreams of constructing wonders in African lands written in their eager faces. In the Coptic quarter, he commissions Christian craftsmen to create illuminated manuscripts, understanding that wisdom transcends religious boundaries when it serves human advancement. You notice him spending long hours with Cairo's blind scholars who've memorized entire libraries, arranging for several to journey to Mali, where their knowledge will be preserved in new forms. The city's poets compose farewell verses comparing him to Solomon and Alexander, though Musa insists he seeks not conquest, but enlightenment. As the caravan prepares to enter the Sahara again, Cairo's economy already shows signs of recovery, though the legend of the African king's golden Hajj has only begun its journey through history. The Sahara crossing on the return journey proves even more treacherous, as winter winds drive sand like frozen needles against exposed skin. Yet you notice the pilgrim's spiritual fortitude has grown stronger than desert hardships. Mansa Musa navigates by stars, and the compass acquired in Cairo, this magnetic miracle that Egyptian scholars claimed was invented by Chinese sages who understand heaven's mysteries. 3 months into the desert, water supplies run dangerously low when expected oases prove dry, forcing Musa to order rationing that makes no distinction between king and slave. You observe him giving his personal water reserves to pregnant women and elderly scholars, his lips cracked and bleeding, while he insists others drink first. The Egyptian architects suffer most, unused to such privation, and 2 die despite all efforts to save them, their bodies buried in sand with prayers that their sacrifice will bloom in African buildings. Sandstorms last for days, forcing the entire caravan to huddle beneath makeshift shelters while the world disappears in brown darkness, punctuated only by prayers shouted against howling winds. You watch Musa maintain morale by promising extra gold to all who survive, though most now follow him for loyalty rather than wealth, transformed by the pilgrimage into something greater than merchants and servants. When finally, the Niger River appears on the horizon like a blue miracle, grown men weep openly, while griots compose songs about the desert that tried to swallow an empire's dreams, but failed. The return to Niani, after 2 years' absence, erupts in celebrations that last for weeks, as you witness Mansa Musa's transformation from wealthy king to legendary figure who brought the world's knowledge home to Africa. The city has changed in his absence, with new mosques and schools already under construction based on plans he sent ahead with advance messengers. You observe the reunion with his wives and children, some born while he traveled, now meeting their father, who smells of distant lands and carries the dust of holy places in his robes. The royal court assembles to hear tales of the journey, gasping at descriptions of Cairo's grandeur and Mecca's spiritual power, though Musa focuses more on the scholars and architects he's brought than on his widely rumored generosity. The Egyptian builders immediately begin surveying sites for their projects, speaking through translators about foundations that must reach bedrock and arches that will stand for millennia.
You watch as Musa establishes a new university in Niani, appointing the Persian and Arab scholars to teach mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and theology to Mali's youth. The returning pilgrims disperse throughout the empire, each carrying stories that will inspire generations to seek knowledge and spiritual fulfillment beyond familiar horizons. In private moments, you notice Musa studying the architectural plans for Timbuktu's expansion, envisioning a city of learning that will rival Baghdad and Cairo. The griots compose new epics about the Hajj, their verses weaving gold, faith, and wisdom into songs that will outlive the empire itself.
5 years after the Hajj, you stand in Timbuktu, witnessing Mansa Musa's vision becoming reality as the city transforms into Africa's intellectual crown jewel. The Sankara Mosque, redesigned by Egyptian architects, using mathematical principles that create perfect acoustic spaces for prayer and learning, rises above mud brick houses like a mountain of human ambition. You observe thousands of students from across Africa and beyond, sitting in courtyards where professors lecture on subjects ranging from Islamic jurisprudence to Greek philosophy, preserved in Arabic translations. The famous manuscript libraries multiply monthly as scribes work in shifts, their fingers stained with ink made from desert plants, copying texts that will preserve human knowledge through future dark ages. Musa personally funds scholars who experiment with mathematics, developing new proofs that Arab mathematicians will later claim as their own discoveries. You watch him establish the world's first university dormitory system, providing free housing and meals to students who journey from distant lands seeking wisdom. The city's markets buzz with languages from across 3 continents, as merchants trade not just gold and salt, but books worth more than both combined. In the astronomy tower, Persian scholars train African students to map stars that guide both caravans and souls through darkness. The evening call to prayer echoes through streets where Jewish merchants, Christian scholars, and Islamic saints coexist in remarkable harmony, united by their respect for knowledge and their patron king's vision of enlightenment, transcending all boundaries. You accompany Mansa Musa to the gold mines of Bambuk, where his wealth originates, witnessing the careful balance between extraction and justice that defines his economic philosophy. The miners, traditionally enslaved or indentured, now work under laws he established guaranteeing rest periods, medical care, and the right to purchase their freedom with gold they find beyond quotas. You observe him descending into the mines, personally, against all protocol, to understand the conditions that create his empire's foundation, emerging covered in red dust, but enlightened about necessary reforms. The Egyptian engineers have designed new ventilation systems that reduce deaths from poisonous gases, while water wheels, powered by the Senegal River, ease the crushing labor of ore extraction. Each nugget passes through weighing stations, where scribes trained in Cairo's mathematical methods ensure accurate recording, preventing the corruption that plagued previous reigns. You watch Musa establish mining schools, where experienced workers teach safer techniques to newcomers, reducing accidents that once claimed hundreds yearly. The gold's journey from earth to treasury follows routes protected by soldiers who understand that their empire's survival depends on this yellow metal that foreigners crave beyond reason. In the smelting facilities, craftsmen from Damascus teach locals to create alloys and decorative pieces that add value beyond raw metal. You notice Musa calculating how much gold flows to Mecca annually through pilgrim donations, ensuring Mali's spiritual investments match its earthly prosperity. The 10th year of Mansa Musa's reign brings agricultural innovations as you witness him applying knowledge gained from Syrian and Egyptian farmers to Mali's ancient soil. The Niger River's annual floods, similar to the Nile's patterns,
now follow irrigation channels designed by engineers who served Mamluk sultans, turning seasonal abundance into year-round prosperity. You observe him establishing agricultural stations where Persian experts teach crop rotation techniques that will prevent the soil exhaustion that destroyed earlier civilizations. New varieties of millet and sorghum, seeds carried from Arabia's oases, prove resistant to droughts that periodically threaten Mali's food security, ensuring no repeat of famines that haunted previous reigns. The royal granaries, built using preservation methods learned in Damascus, store enough grain to feed the entire capital for 3 years, a buffer against both natural disasters and siege warfare. You watch Musa personally plant orchards of date palms grown from Medinan seedlings, their fruit eventually becoming a reminder of his spiritual journey in every harvest. Cotton cultivation expands dramatically as Egyptian weavers teach locals to produce textiles that will compete with imports, creating economic independence that strengthens the empire's negotiating position. In the cattle regions, veterinary knowledge from Cairo's animal doctors reduces disease outbreaks that once decimated herds, while selective breeding programs promise stronger animals within generations. The agricultural surplus enables Musa to support larger populations of scholars, artists, and craftsmen who don't produce food, creating the leisure necessary for civilization's advancement. You stand in Mansa Musa's court as he receives troubling news that his son and heir, Magan, has developed a love for luxury that worries even the most indulgent courtiers. The prince, now 20, dresses in silk garments that cost more than villages, surrounding himself with sycophants who praise his mediocre poetry, while emptying the treasury allocated for his education. You observe the pain in Musa's eyes as he realizes his pilgrimage's spiritual lessons have not transferred to his offspring, who sees gold as an end rather than a means to serve Allah and humanity. The confrontation between father and son occurs in private, but servants report shouting that echoes through palace corridors. The Mansa demanding his heir spend time with common people to understand their struggles. Magan's response comes through actions rather than words, hosting even more elaborate parties, where Egyptian wine flows while musicians play until dawn disturbs the morning prayers. You watch Musa attempt different approaches, appointing strict tutors who resign in frustration, sending his son to govern remote provinces, where he creates small scandals that require royal intervention. The empire's administrators whisper concerns about succession, some suggesting Musa's brothers' sons might prove worthier heirs, though such talk borders on treason. In the mosque, you notice Musa praying longer each day, seeking divine guidance for a problem that all his wisdom cannot solve. The irony doesn't escape observers that the man who gave away enough gold to destabilize economies cannot give his own son the values that matter more than wealth. The great library of Timbuktu becomes Mansa Musa's refuge, as you observe him spending increasing hours among manuscripts that hold more wisdom than his troubled heir seems willing to absorb. The collection now exceeds 400,000 volumes, making it larger than any European library and rivaling the great collections of Baghdad before the Mongols' destruction. You watch him personally cataloguing new arrivals, books on Chinese inventions that arrived through Indian Ocean trade routes, their strange characters holding secrets of gunpowder and printing that could revolutionize warfare and learning. Jewish scholars from Cairo have established a Hebrew section where they preserve texts saved from European persecutions. Their gratitude to Musa expressed in illuminated manuscripts, decorated with African and Semitic motifs intertwined. The medical college attached to the library performs surgeries using techniques from Persian texts, with success rates that would amaze European doctors still bleeding patients for every ailment. You observe Musa funding translation projects that render Greek philosophy into Mandinka, ensuring his people can access wisdom without surrendering their linguistic heritage to Arabic dominance. Students debate in the courtyard,
whether Aristotle's logic applies to African kinship systems, creating new philosophical frameworks that blend universal truths with local wisdom. The library's influence extends throughout West Africa, as scholars carry copied texts to establish smaller libraries in distant cities, spreading literacy like seeds that will bloom in future generations. At sunset, you notice Musa standing on the library's roof, surveying a city of learning that will outlive his dynasty. Political tensions rise in the eastern provinces as you witness Mansa Musa dealing with the Mossi kingdom's raids that test his military leadership in ways the Hajj never did. The raiders strike at night, burning villages and carrying away prisoners to sell in distant slave markets, their hit-and-run tactics frustrating Mali's larger but slower armies. You observe Musa adapting strategies learned from Mamluk generals in Cairo, creating mobile cavalry units that can pursue raiders across difficult terrain previously considered impassable. The ethical dilemma of violence troubles him deeply as he balances Islamic teachings about peace with a ruler's duty to protect his subjects from brutality. In war councils, Egyptian military advisors suggest fortifying border towns using designs that proved effective against crusaders, while Musa insists on also addressing root causes through diplomacy. You watch him send ambassadors bearing gifts to Mossi kings, offering trade agreements that would make raiding less profitable than peaceful commerce, though some view this as weakness. The campaign season brings victories and defeats in equal measure, each battle's aftermath finding Musa tending wounded soldiers, regardless of which side they fought for. His son Magan surprisingly volunteers to lead a regiment, perhaps seeking military glory to compensate for other failings, though his father assigns experienced generals to prevent disaster. The conflict's resolution comes through a combination of force and negotiation, establishing buffer zones governed jointly that will maintain uneasy peace for decades. The festival of Tabaski arrives as you witness Mansa Musa celebrating the sacrifice of Abraham with ceremonies that blend Islamic tradition with African customs in ways that would puzzle purists from Arabia. Thousands of cattle and sheep, their horns decorated with gold leaf, fill Niani's squares as each family prepares to commemorate divine mercy through sharing meat with those who have none. You observe Musa personally selecting the finest bull from royal herds, leading it through streets where children throw flowers, while griots sing of sacrifices both spiritual and temporal. The slaughter follows Islamic law precisely, with prayers in Arabic that many don't understand but feel in their hearts, the blood flowing into earth that has known such offerings since before written history. Distribution of meat becomes a lesson in social justice, as Musa ensures the poorest families receive the choicest portions, reversing the usual order where wealth determines quality. You watch him sitting with former slaves he freed, sharing meals that erase social boundaries temporarily, though everyone understands tomorrow will restore hierarchies. The Egyptian scholars express surprise at drumming and dancing that accompany religious observance, but Musa explains that joy serves Allah as surely as solemn prayer. In the evening, bonfires illuminate faces from across the empire, Tuareg, Fulani, Mandinka, and Arab, united in celebration that transcends ethnic divisions. The festival's conclusion brings prayers for prosperity and peace, though you notice Musa adding personal supplications for wisdom to guide his troubled son toward righteousness. Years of prosperity have attracted envious eyes as you observe Mansa Musa receiving intelligence that the Songhai kingdom plots rebellion, their leaders believing Mali's focus on scholarship has weakened its military spine. The conspiracy involves several provincial governors who resent sending gold to fund libraries, while their regions lack basic infrastructure, a complaint that holds enough truth to sting. You watch Musa convene secret councils, where spies report on rebellion's roots, revealing that his son Magan's excesses during provincial visits have fueled resentment more than any policy failure. The dilemma of crushing rebellion violently
versus addressing legitimate grievances through reform creates heated debates among advisors trained in different traditions of governance. Egyptian administrators suggest Ottoman-style centralization, while African counselors warn that excessive control will shatter the delicate ethnic balance holding the empire together. You observe Musa choosing a middle path, traveling personally to disaffected regions with minimal military escort, demonstrating trust that disarms many conspirators. In village after village, he listens to complaints about tax collectors' corruption, promises of schools never built, and trade routes that favor Niani while bypassing local markets. The journey becomes a second education in leadership, teaching him that pilgrimage to Mecca brought spiritual enlightenment, but governing requires understanding his own people's earthly needs. By journey's end, the rebellion dissolves through combinations of pardons, reforms, and strategic replacement of corrupt officials. Though everyone knows the underlying tensions remain, like fault lines waiting for future earthquakes.
The Chinese fleet arrives at Mali's Atlantic ports as you witness an event that will remain debated by historians for centuries. Massive ships with red sails carrying traders from the Middle Kingdom seeking direct African gold sources. You observe Mansa Musa receiving Admiral Zheng He's representatives, Muslim Chinese who pray in Arabic while speaking of an emperor who rules more subjects than there are stars visible to the naked eye. The gifts they present defy comprehension, including mechanical clocks that track celestial movements, porcelain so fine that light passes through, and silk embroidered with dragons that seem to move in candlelight. The negotiations require multiple translators, as Chinese to Arabic to Mandinka creates opportunities for misunderstanding that diplomats navigate carefully. You watch Musa offering gold for technologies that could revolutionize Mali, particularly printing presses that could multiply his library's contents infinitely. Though Chinese guards protect these secrets fiercely, the cultural exchange extends beyond trade, as Chinese doctors demonstrate acupuncture, while African healers share plant medicines unknown in Asia, each tradition recognizing wisdom in the other. Ship's logs that survive suggest Musa considered sending ambassadors to Beijing, though the distance and his advancing age make such journeys impossible. The fleet departs after 3 months, their holds filled with gold and ivory, leaving behind gifts and questions about what might have developed had these civilizations maintained contact. You notice Musa studying celestial maps the Chinese provided, wondering what lies beyond the edges where even their knowledge ends. The construction of Niani's Great Mosque reaches completion as you witness Mansa Musa's architectural vision, merging Egyptian engineering with Sudanese aesthetics into something uniquely Malian. The structure rises 5 stories, its minaret visible from miles away, topped with a golden crescent that weighs more than most men can lift. You observe the dedication ceremony, where representatives from every corner of the Islamic world marvel at acoustic designs that carry whispers from the mihrab to the furthest corner without echo. The mosque's library rivals Timbuktu's collection, with reading rooms where natural light filters through colored glass, obtained from Venetian traders who ventured further south than any Europeans before. The ablution fountains flow continuously through hydraulic systems that Egyptian engineers claim surpass even Cairo's achievements, while gardens modeled on Quranic descriptions of paradise provide meditation spaces. You watch Musa lead the first Friday prayers, his voice carrying teachings about mercy and justice to 20,000 faithful packed into courtyards designed to hold such multitudes. The celebration continues for weeks as scholars deliver lectures, poets recite verses commissioned for the occasion, and merchants establish waqf endowments ensuring the mosque's perpetual maintenance. In quiet moments, you notice Musa touching the mosque's walls like a father checking his child's fever, knowing this building will outlive him, but wondering if his spiritual legacy will endure equally long. The structure becomes a pilgrimage site within Mali, drawing believers who cannot afford the journey to Mecca, but find divine presence in architecture that reaches toward heaven. Disease strikes the empire as you witness Mansa Musa confronting an enemy that neither gold nor armies can defeat. a plague that traders inadvertently carried from North African ports. The sickness spreads along trade routes faster than horses can carry warnings, turning prosperous cities into places where the call to prayer echoes unanswered. You observe him consulting Egyptian physicians who recognize symptoms similar to pestilences that periodically devastate Mediterranean cities, though their remedies prove inconsistent against this particular strain. The royal family isn't spared, as two of Musa's younger sons succumb despite receiving the best available care, their deaths shaking his faith in ways that years of challenges never did. Quarantine measures learned from Chinese texts prove partially effective, with cities that close their gates suffering less than those maintaining normal commerce, though the economic consequences threaten to unravel decades of prosperity. You watch Musa personally visiting plague hospitals, ignoring advisors who plead for him to preserve himself for the empire's sake, distributing gold that cannot buy health but provides comfort to the dying. Traditional healers work alongside Islamic doctors and Chinese medicine practitioners, their combined knowledge slowly developing treatments that reduce mortality rates. The plague burns itself out after claiming nearly a tenth of Mali's population, leaving empty villages and traumatized survivors questioning divine justice. In the aftermath, you notice Musa establishing medical schools specifically to study epidemic diseases, understanding that future plagues are inevitable in an interconnected world. Recovery from the plague brings unexpected changes as you observe Mansa Musa's surviving son, Magan, displaying newfound maturity, the proximity to death having burned away his superficial obsessions. The prince begins attending council meetings without being summoned, asking intelligent questions about reconstruction efforts, and showing genuine concern for subjects' welfare. You watch father and son working together to rebuild devastated provinces, their previous conflicts replaced by shared purpose in healing the empire's wounds. The economic recovery requires innovative solutions, as Musa establishes credit systems, allowing merchants to rebuild without immediate gold, trusting future prosperity to repay current investments. Agricultural regions receive special attention, with new irrigation projects, ensuring food security against future catastrophes, while abandoned villages are resettled with incentives that include land ownership previously reserved for nobles. You observe the reconstruction of trade networks, with careful attention to preventing disease transmission, including inspection stations where travelers must prove their health before entering cities. The Chinese medical knowledge proves invaluable as Mali becomes the first African kingdom to implement systematic public health measures that Europe won't adopt for centuries. In Timbuktu, scholars document the plague's progression and treatment methods, creating medical texts that will guide future generations through similar crises. The shared trauma creates unexpected unity, as ethnic and religious differences seem trivial compared to survival, though you notice Musa warning that such unity rarely survives prosperity's return. The empire's borders expand peacefully as you witness Mansa Musa's reputation drawing voluntary submissions from kingdoms that prefer his enlightened rule to their own dynasty's corruption. The Wolof kingdoms send ambassadors proposing incorporation that would extend Mali's reach to the Atlantic's fishing grounds, offering access to ocean resources previously beyond imagination. You observe negotiations that respect local customs, while establishing universal laws about justice and trade, creating a federal structure that later African nations will attempt to replicate. The integration brings new challenges, as coastal peoples worship differently than inland Muslims, their traditions including practices that Islamic law forbids, but political wisdom suggests tolerating. Musa establishes provincial autonomy in religious matters, while maintaining central control over military and economic policies, a balance that satisfies neither fundamentalists nor complete libertarians, but functions pragmatically. You watch him learning coastal languages at an age when most rulers delegate such efforts, understanding that linguistic respect earns loyalty more effectively than military occupation. The expanded empire requires new administrative systems, as Egyptian bureaucratic models prove inadequate for governing such diverse populations across vast distances. Communication networks using drum signals and rider relays connect the Atlantic coast to Timbuktu in weeks rather than months, enabling coordinated responses to crises. By year's end, Mali encompasses more territory than any African empire before or since, though you notice Musa warning against expansion beyond administrative capacity, wisdom his successors will tragically ignore.
The question of succession grows urgent as you observe Mansa Musa, now in his 60s, confronting mortality's approach with the same thoughtful planning that characterized his reign. Prince Magan has transformed into a capable administrator, but whispers persist about his youthful excesses, making him unsuitable for the spiritual leadership the empire requires. You watch Musa consulting constitutional scholars about precedents for dividing authority between multiple heirs, perhaps separating religious from temporal power in ways that Islamic tradition generally opposes. The Council of Elders debates through entire nights, their discussions ranging from ancient Mandinka succession customs to Ottoman practices of fraternal competition that ensure only the strongest rule. Private meetings between father and son reveal Magan's awareness of his limitations, surprisingly suggesting his younger brother might better embody their father's wisdom. You observe Musa establishing a regency council, including Egyptian advisors, Mandinka nobles, and Islamic judges, designed to guide whoever succeeds him through the early years. The succession plans include detailed instructions for maintaining the libraries, funding the schools, and preserving trade relationships that sustain the empire's prosperity. Documents are prepared in multiple languages and copies secured in different cities, preventing any single faction from altering arrangements after Musa's death. In the mosque, you notice him praying, not for his legacy, but for Allah's mercy on an empire that might fragment without divinely inspired leadership. The final pilgrimage season of Mansa Musa's life arrives, as you witness him unable to travel, but sponsoring the largest Hajj caravan since his own journey decades earlier. 5,000 pilgrims receive full funding, including transportation, provisions, and spending money for the sacred cities. Their departure ceremony drawing crowds, remembering the legendary Golden Hajj. You observe Musa personally blessing each section of the caravan, his hands trembling with age, but his voice strong as he recites prayers for their safe journey. The lead pilgrim carries letters to be placed at the Prophet's tomb, messages from an African king who transformed his continent through faith and wisdom rather than conquest. Among the pilgrims are young scholars who will study in Cairo and Damascus before returning to teach in Mali's schools, continuing the knowledge exchange Musa initiated. You watch him giving special instructions to architects, traveling to study the recent renovations of Mecca's Grand Mosque, hoping to build something similar in Mali before his death. The caravan includes gifts for the holy city's poor that, while generous, carefully avoid the economic disruption his previous generosity caused, showing lessons learned through experience. As the procession disappears into the desert, you notice Musa weeping openly, knowing he will never see Mecca again in this life, but trusting his spiritual investments will earn divine favor. The griots compose songs about this final sponsorship, recognizing it as the last great act of a reign defined by unprecedented generosity. The royal physicians whisper their concerns as you observe Mansa Musa's strength failing like sand through an hourglass, though his mind remains sharp enough to continue governing from his bed. The palace transforms into a quiet place where courtiers walk softly and speak in hushed tones, understanding that an era approaches its conclusion. You watch him dictating final letters to foreign rulers, each message containing advice about justice and generosity that summarizes a lifetime's wisdom in elegant phrases. His sons take turns sitting beside him, receiving individual counsel about their roles in preserving the empire's unity after its architect departs. The greatest scholars from Timbuktu arrive to record his final thoughts on governance, creating texts that will be studied for centuries by leaders seeking to understand enlightened rule. You observe him distributing personal possessions among servants and guards who've shown loyalty, each gift accompanied by blessings that receivers will treasure more than gold. The Egyptian architects present models of buildings still under construction, receiving his approval for designs he knows he'll never see completed. In lucid moments, he speaks of seeing his departed sons in dreams, describing paradise in terms that comfort grieving family members while maintaining Islamic orthodoxy. The Imam leads continuous prayers in the palace mosque, their rhythmic Arabic providing a soundtrack to the great king's final days. The news of Mansa Musa's death spreads across the empire like the harmattan wind, as you witness a kingdom mourning the loss of its greatest ruler. The exact moment of his passing comes during the dawn prayer, his last words reportedly praising Allah, while asking forgiveness for any failures in serving his people. You observe the immediate implementation of succession plans, as Prince Magan assumes authority smoothly, the Regency Council functioning exactly as his father designed. The funeral preparations follow both Islamic law and Mandinka tradition, his body washed by the holiest men in the empire, while griots begin composing laments that will be sung for generations. From every corner of Mali, delegations arrive bearing condolences and tributes, their grief genuine rather than ceremonial, understanding they've lost a leader who truly cared for their welfare. You watch as foreign ambassadors from Cairo, Damascus, and even Christian kingdoms send representatives, acknowledging Musa's impact on global trade and scholarship. The burial takes place before sunset, as Islamic law requires, but the site becomes immediately sacred, with pilgrims beginning visits that will continue for centuries. His wealth, carefully documented by Egyptian accountants, proves even greater than rumored, with provisions for schools, mosques, and hospitals that will operate in perpetuity. The Library of Timbuktu declares a year of mourning, during which scholars will focus on preserving and copying his writings, ensuring his intellectual legacy matches his material one.
The first year after Mansa Musa's death tests every institution he established, as you observe the empire adjusting to absence of its guiding light. Prince Magan, now Mansa Magan II, surprises skeptics by governing with unexpected wisdom, as if his father's death awakened dormant capabilities. You watch him maintaining the Hajj sponsorships, continuing library funding, and preserving trade relationships, despite pressure from nobles who see opportunities to enrich themselves. The Regency Council functions as designed, preventing any single faction from dominating, while ensuring continuity in policies that take generations to show results. Small rebellions flare in distant provinces, where governors test the new Mansa's resolve, but swift responses, combining military force with negotiation, show he learned from his father's methods. You observe the Timbuktu scholars publishing Mansa Musa's collected writings, their distribution throughout the Islamic world, ensuring his thoughts on governance influenced leaders from Andalusia to India. The Egyptian architects complete the Grand Mosque in Gao, its dedication ceremony drawing comparisons to Mansa Musa's generosity, though Magan wisely avoids trying to match his father's legendary displays. Trade continues to flourish as merchants honor agreements made with Mansa Musa, understanding that reputation in commerce outlives individual rulers. The empire's population, recovered from the plague, begins showing unprecedented literacy rates as children educated in Musa's schools become adults who value knowledge. By year's end, it becomes clear that while the man is gone, the systems and values he established will endure.
5 years pass as you witness Mansa Musa's legacy crystallizing into permanent changes that transform West Africa beyond his empire's borders. The schools he established have graduated thousands of students who spread literacy and Islamic scholarship throughout the region, creating an intellectual network that rivals Mediterranean civilizations. You observe trade routes he secured becoming permanent highways of commerce, with standardized weights, measures, and currency exchange rates that facilitate business from the Atlantic to the Red Sea. The architectural innovations brought by Egyptian builders have been adapted to local materials and climate, creating a distinctive Sudano-Sahelian style that will define African Islamic architecture for centuries. His libraries continue growing as scholars consider manuscript donation a form of religious charity, ensuring knowledge accumulates rather than disappearing with individual deaths. You watch European traders arriving in greater numbers, drawn by tales of Mansa Musa's gold that have reached even distant London and Paris, though they find a sophisticated empire rather than the primitive land they expected. The medical knowledge accumulated during the plague years saves thousands as new epidemics arise, but meet prepared responses rather than helpless panic. His emphasis on religious tolerance while maintaining Islamic dominance creates a model for multi-faith empires that Ottoman sultans study and partially adopt. The Hajj route he traveled has become a permanent pilgrimage highway, with infrastructure supporting annual caravans, making the journey safer for all African Muslims.
A generation has passed since Mansa Musa's death as you observe children who never knew him, learning about his reign as history rather than memory. The empire has evolved beyond his direct vision, with innovations he couldn't have imagined, built upon foundations he laid carefully. You watch Timbuktu University expanded far beyond his plans, attracting scholars from China, India, and Europe who consider it essential for understanding mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The gold trade has shifted as European maritime routes begin competing with trans-Saharan caravans. Yet Mali's economy adapted using principles of diversification Musa learned during his travels. His descendants, now numerous, include both worthy rulers and wastrels, though the institutional structures prevent any single failure from destroying the empire immediately. You observe Islamic practices in Mali, incorporating African elements more deeply, creating a unique synthesis that visiting Arabs find heretical, but effective in maintaining social harmony. The legend of his Hajj has grown beyond historical accuracy, with storytellers claiming he built mosques of solid gold and freed 1 million slaves, though the truth remains impressive enough. European maps now show Mali prominently, often illustrated with Mansa Musa holding a golden nugget, the only African ruler most Europeans can name. His writings on governance are studied in Cairo's madrasas, alongside classical Islamic texts, establishing an African voice in Islamic intellectual tradition. The anniversary of his death brings pilgrims to his tomb, which has become a site where people seek blessings for wisdom and prosperity.
The empire begins its slow decline as you witness the gradual erosion of systems Mansa Musa established. Though their deterioration takes decades rather than years, his great-grandson lacks both the wisdom and resources to maintain the vast territory, with provincial governors declaring independence while still claiming to honor Musa's memory. You observe Timbuktu maintaining its intellectual prominence, even as political control fragments, its scholars preserving knowledge that Europe's Renaissance will later rediscover and claim as its own. The gold mines that funded Musa's generosity begin depleting, forcing rulers to debase currency and raise taxes in ways that would have horrified him. Portuguese sailors arriving on the coast speak of Mansa Musa as if he were mythical, unable to reconcile the current modest kingdoms with legends of infinite wealth. You watch as the trans-Saharan trade routes shift toward the coast, where European fortresses will eventually facilitate slave trades that Musa would have found abhorrent. Yet his institutional legacies prove remarkably resilient, with schools continuing to operate through local funding and libraries preserving manuscripts through individual dedication rather than royal patronage. The ideal of just Islamic governance he embodied becomes a standard against which subsequent rulers are measured and found wanting. His architectural innovations survive in buildings that outlast the empire. Their walls still standing when European colonizers arrive centuries later, puzzled by sophisticated structures in what they assumed was primitive wilderness. Centuries have passed as you observe modern archaeologists uncovering evidence of Mansa Musa's reign, their scientific methods confirming what seemed like impossible exaggerations in medieval chronicles. The gold artifacts found in buried palaces prove the wealth was real, while architectural foundations reveal sophisticated urban planning that predated European cities' similar developments. You watch scholars in climate-controlled rooms carefully preserving manuscripts from his libraries, documents that contain mathematical proofs, astronomical observations, and medical knowledge that challenge narratives of African intellectual backwardness. His name appears in unexpected places as researchers discover trade documents in Venice mentioning the Golden King of Africa, whose currency fluctuations affected Mediterranean markets. Modern Mali, impoverished and struggling, invokes his memory as proof of past greatness and future potential, though the connection between then and now seems tenuous. You observe international conferences where historians debate his impact on global economy, with some arguing his gold injections helped fund Europe's renaissance through increased liquidity. The pilgrimage route he traveled has become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, with tourists retracing steps that once carried the ancient world's greatest fortune. His emphasis on education echoes in modern African universities that claim intellectual descent from Timbuktu, though colonialism's disruptions make direct connections difficult to prove. The legend has grown beyond any possible historical accuracy. Yet the documented truth remains remarkable enough to inspire those who dream of Africa's renaissance. Tonight, as you prepare to close your eyes and drift into sleep, you carry with you the complete journey of Mansa Musa, from the crying infant in a mud brick palace to the eternal legend whose name echoes through centuries. You have witnessed how one man's vision transformed not just an empire, but an entire continent's relationship with the wider world, proving that Africa was never the isolated, primitive place that later histories would claim. The gold he distributed may have vanished into the economies of distant lands, but the knowledge he promoted, the institutions he established, and the connections he forged created ripples that still move through time. You have seen how his pilgrimage was more than a religious journey, becoming instead a diplomatic mission that announced Africa's presence on the world stage with such magnificence that no one could ignore it. Through plague and prosperity, through his failures with his son and his successes with scholarship, you have observed a human being wrestling with power's responsibilities while maintaining faith's humility. His story reminds us that true wealth lies not in gold that can be stolen or spent, but in knowledge preserved, in justice administered, and in connections between diverse peoples who learn to see each other's humanity. As your breathing slows and sleep approaches, remember that Mansa Musa's Cairo still stands. His Timbuktu manuscripts still teach. And somewhere in Mali's soil lie the foundations of buildings that once touched the sky. The desert winds that carry sand across the Sahara also carry whispers of his name, reminding us that some lights shine so brightly that even centuries of darkness cannot extinguish their glow. Rest now, knowing you have traveled with greatness. And may your dreams be filled with golden possibilities and the wisdom to use them well. The candles of history have burned low now, and the last grains of sand have fallen through time's hourglass.
You've journeyed through 7 centuries, walking alongside kings and scholars, crossing deserts that claimed thousands, and standing in mosques where prayers still echo. Your pillow has become softer than the silk cushions of Mansa Musa's throne, more welcoming than the beds of Cairo's finest houses. The weight of golden knowledge has transformed into the gentle weight of approaching sleep, pulling you down into dreams, where perhaps you'll walk through Timbuktu's ancient libraries or stand in Mecca's sacred spaces. The sounds of medieval markets, of griots singing genealogies, of thousands praying in unison. They all fade now into the rhythm of your own breathing, slow and steady, like camel steps across endless dunes. You are safe in your modern comfort, far from desert heat and political intrigue, yet carrying within you the timeless lessons of justice, generosity, and the pursuit of knowledge. Let the last images drift through your mind like sand paintings scattered by gentle wind. Gold flowing like water, manuscripts being copied by candlelight, architectural wonders rising from African soil, and an old king's peaceful face as he prays his final prayer. These stories are yours now, woven into your consciousness, ready to inspire tomorrow's dreams, and perhaps, like Mansa Musa's gold, to enrich the world in ways you cannot yet imagine. Sleep well, traveler through time. You have witnessed greatness, understood humanity, and learned that true wealth lies not in what we hoard, but in what we share. May your dreams be golden, and your rest as peaceful as the libraries of Timbuktu on a quiet afternoon, where wisdom waits patiently for tomorrow's seekers. Good night.